For 8 years, my daughter borrowed money from me for house rent. In total, I gave her $55,000. But one day, her neighbor wrote, "Your daughter bought this house 15 years ago." When I talked to him, I found out. Good day, dear listeners. It's Clara again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to think I knew my daughter Rebecca. For 34 years, I'd watched her grow from a bright-eyed girl into a capable woman with a family of her own. My late husband Tom would have been so proud. After he passed 6 years ago, Rebecca became my anchor, calling every week, visiting on holidays, always seeming to care. Then came that first phone call 8 years ago. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could you help us with rent this month? Derek's commission check got delayed." Derek, her husband, worked in sales. The request seemed reasonable. They had 2 young kids, and I remembered our own tight months when Rebecca was little. I sent her $700 without hesitation. The calls continued, every month or two, sometimes 3 times in 1 month. The rent was always due, always urgent. The landlord's threatening eviction. "They're raising the rent again. We're just short this month." Each time, I wired the money. What else could I do? Let my grandchildren become homeless? I never questioned it deeply. Why would I? This was Rebecca, my only child, the girl I'd raised to be honest and kind. Sure, I noticed she never seemed to get ahead financially, despite Derek's successful sales career. But housing was expensive in their city, and raising kids wasn't cheap. I knew that firsthand. Over 8 years, the amounts added up. 500 here, 800 there. Sometimes 1,000 when things got really desperate. I kept meticulous records in my checkbook, a habit from my banking days. By last spring, I'd given Rebecca $55,000. 55,000. The number made my stomach turn when I finally calculated it, but I pushed the discomfort away. Family helps family. That's what Tom always said. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in April, slipped into my mailbox between a grocery store flyer and my electric bill. Plain white envelope, unfamiliar handwriting. No return address. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. At 72, mysterious letters rarely bring good news. "Dear Mrs. Patterson," it began, "you don't know me, but I'm your daughter's neighbor, Gerald Hutchinson. I've lived next door to Rebecca and Derek for 16 years. I'm writing because I recently overheard Rebecca on her porch, talking on the phone about rent money from Mom and laughing about how easy it was. Ma'am, I don't know what she's told you, but your daughter and son-in-law bought that house 15 years ago. I was here when they moved in. They own it free and clear, paid it off 7 years ago. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. A mother deserves to know the truth." The letter slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the kitchen floor. Bought the house 15 years ago? Paid it off 7 years ago? That meant... My God, that meant Rebecca had been lying to me for 8 solid years. Every tearful phone call about eviction notices, every desperate plea for rent money, all fabricated, all lies. I sank into my kitchen chair, the same one I'd sat in when Tom died, when Rebecca called to tell me she was pregnant the first time, when I'd received every piece of life-changing news for the past 40 years. But this was different. This was betrayal wrapped in my own daughter's voice. Why would she do this? What had she spent my money on? $55,000. That was most of what Tom and I had saved for my retirement, for emergencies, for the life I was supposed to live after he was gone. Had Rebecca ever loved me? Or had I just been an ATM machine with a maternal heartbeat? I picked up the letter again, reading it 3 more times, searching for some indication it was a cruel joke or a mistake. But Gerald Hutchinson had included his phone number at the bottom. "Call me if you need verification," he'd written. "I have documents. My daughter. My only child. The person I'd trusted more than anyone in the world after Tom died. How long had she been laughing at me? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my dining room table with 8 years of bank statements spread before me like evidence at a crime scene. Each highlighted transaction mocked me. Wire transfer to Rebecca Patterson, $750. Check number 1847 to Rebecca Patterson, $1,200. Online transfer, $500. Rent help for Becca. Rent help for Becca. I'd even written little notes to myself, documenting my own generosity, my own stupidity. The final tally was worse than I'd remembered. $55,340. I'd given my daughter enough money to buy a decent car, to fund years of retirement travel, to leave something meaningful to my grandchildren. Instead, it had vanished into whatever black hole of lies Rebecca had created. But what had she spent it on? That question haunted me through the dark hours. Designer handbags? Vacations? Gambling? Or had she and Derek simply enjoyed the thrill of conning the old woman who'd given Rebecca life? Part of me wanted to crumple Gerald Hutchinson's letter and pretend I'd never received it. What would confronting Rebecca accomplish except destroying what remained of our relationship? I could just stop sending money, make excuses, fade away quietly like mothers are supposed to do when their children disappoint them. But then I thought of Tom. My husband had been a proud man, a fair man. "Dorothy," he used to say, "you teach people how to treat you. If you accept disrespect, you'll get more of it." Tom wouldn't have stayed silent. Tom would have demanded answers, demanded justice. At 6:47 a.m., as weak sunlight filtered through my kitchen curtains, I made my decision. I would find out the truth. All of it. And then? Well, I'd figure out the then when I knew what I was dealing with. First, I needed to verify Gerald's claims. As much as I wanted to believe my daughter, the evidence already pointed toward his version of events. I picked up my phone 3 times before finally dialing the number on the letter. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hutchinson residence. A man's voice, older, gravelly, but kind. "Mr. Hutchinson, this is Dorothy Patterson, Rebecca's mother. I received your letter." He sighed deeply. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm glad you called. I wasn't sure if I should have sent it, but my wife convinced me. She said if it was her mother being lied to, she'd want to know." "Is it true? About the house?" "Every word, ma'am. I've got copies of the property records if you need them. Rebecca and Derek closed on the house in May of 2009. I remember because they had a housewarming party that July, and Derek got drunk and told everyone how they'd stolen the property in a foreclosure sale. Paid $230,000 for a house worth $350. My throat tightened. May 2009. Rebecca had asked for her first rent payment in March 2016, 7 years after buying the house, just months after Tom died. She'd waited until my husband was gone, until I was vulnerable and alone, to start her scheme. "Mr. Hutchinson, why are you telling me this? You don't know me." A pause. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm 76 years old. I've got grandkids I don't see enough, and I've made my share of mistakes. But watching your daughter laugh on her phone about tricking you out of rent money, that crossed a line. Some things are just wrong. Besides, my Clara would haunt me if I stayed quiet." I thanked him, my voice breaking, and asked him to email me the property records. He promised to send them within the hour. Next, I needed more information. I called my nephew Marcus, an attorney in Denver. We weren't particularly close, but he was family, and more importantly, he was sharp. "Aunt Dorothy, what a nice surprise. How are you?" Marcus, I need legal advice. Confidentially. His tone shifted immediately. Of course, what's going on? I told him everything. The 8 years of rent payments, Gerald's letter, the property records I was about to receive. Marcus listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Aunt Dorothy, what you're describing could constitute fraud. Depending on how she solicited the money, there might be criminal implications. At minimum, it's grounds for a civil suit. I'm not sure I want to sue my own daughter. I understand, but you need to protect yourself. Don't confront her yet, not until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Can you gather all your records? Every check, every transfer, every text or email where she asked for money. I have everything. Good. Send it all to me. Let me review it. In the meantime, don't send her another dime, and don't let her know you're suspicious. That last part would be the hardest. Gerald's email arrived at 9:23 a.m. with the subject line, "Documents you requested." Attached were PDF scans of property records, tax assessments, and even a photograph of Rebecca and Derek standing in front of their house holding a sold sign, their smiles wide and triumphant. The date on the sign, May 17th, 2009. I printed everything, my hands shaking so badly I nearly jammed the printer twice. Then I organized it all in a manila folder alongside my bank statements. Physical evidence. Undeniable proof that my daughter was a liar and a thief. Marcus called back that afternoon. Aunt Dorothy, I've reviewed what you sent. This is textbook fraud, obtaining money through false pretenses. She claimed she needed rent payment for housing she actually owned. That's not a gray area. What are my options? Several. You could file a police report for theft by deception. You could sue civilly for the money back plus damages. Or you could confront her privately and demand repayment. But Dorothy, and I'm saying this as your nephew and your attorney, you need to be prepared for the possibility that she won't repay you willingly. People who run cons like this for 8 years don't typically experience sudden conscience attacks. What would you do if it was your mother? Marcus didn't hesitate. I'd get my money back, whatever it took. Family doesn't get a pass on theft. I decided to start with official documentation. Marcus advised me to file a complaint with the county district attorney's office, not to press charges immediately, but to create a paper trail. If she threatens you, if she tries to manipulate you, you want this on record, he explained. The following Monday, I drove to the county government center, an imposing brick building that smelled like floor wax and bureaucracy. The woman at the fraud division, a tired-looking investigator named Sharon Reeves, listened to my story with increasingly raised eyebrows. Ma'am, how much did you give her over 8 years? $55,340. Sharon whistled low. And she owns the house free and clear? According to the property records, yes. Mrs. Patterson, what you're describing is felony theft by deception. With amounts over $50,000, we're looking at serious criminal charges if you want to pursue this. Did I want to pursue it? The question sat heavy in my chest. This was Rebecca, my baby girl. But that baby girl had stolen my retirement, had exploited my grief over Tom, had lied to my face for nearly a decade. I want to file the complaint, I said. I'm not sure about charges yet, but I want this documented. Sharon nodded approvingly. Smart. We'll open a file. In cases like this, we typically recommend the victim attempt to resolve it civilly first. Send a formal demand letter. If the perpetrator refuses to cooperate, then we move forward with criminal proceedings. Does that work for you? Yes, but here's what Sharon didn't know, what I couldn't have anticipated. Rebecca had been monitoring my bank account. I discovered this 2 days later when Derek called me, the first time he'd phoned me directly in over 3 years. Dorothy, it's Derek. Listen, we need to talk about this misunderstanding. My blood went cold. What misunderstanding? Rebecca noticed you haven't sent the rent money in 2 weeks. And when she checked, look, she has access to your account from that time you were in the hospital and needed help paying bills, remember? She saw you'd printed bank statements going back 8 years. What's going on? Are you okay? Are you... Is your memory all right? The manipulation was breathtaking. He was trying to make me think I was senile, that I'd forgotten giving Rebecca access to my account 4 years ago when I'd had pneumonia. My memory is perfect, Derek, and Rebecca needs to remove herself from my bank account immediately. Dorothy, don't be upset. We're family. Rebecca's just worried about you. She should be worried about herself. I know about the house, Derek. I know you bought it 15 years ago. I know every rent payment I sent was a lie. Silence. Long, stretching silence that confirmed everything. Finally, who told you that? Because whoever it was is mistaken. We refinanced a few years ago, so maybe the records look... Derek, stop. I have the property records. I have photographs. I have a witness. The lies are over. His voice changed then, dropped the fake concern, and turned cold. You need to be very careful, Dorothy. Very careful about the accusations you make. Rebecca has been nothing but a devoted daughter. If you're going to start spreading lies about us, there will be consequences. Is that a threat? It's advice from family. He hung up. My hands trembled as I set down the phone. They knew. They knew I'd discovered the truth. And instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a hint of remorse, Derek had threatened me. What had I raised? What monster had I welcomed into my family? I called Marcus immediately. They know I found out. Derek just called and threatened me. Did you record it? No, I start recording everything, every call, every text, every interaction. Dorothy, these people are not going to go quietly. You need to prepare for war. Marcus sent me the formal demand letter on Wednesday. It was typed on his law firm's letterhead, cold and professional. Dear Ms. Rebecca Patterson and Mr. Derek Patterson. This firm represents Dorothy Patterson regarding fraudulent solicitation of funds between March 2016 and April 2024. Our client has documentation proving you obtained $55,340 under false pretenses by claiming you needed rent payment for a property you owned outright. You have 10 business days to remit full payment, or we will pursue criminal fraud charges and civil litigation. This is your only notice. I mailed it certified, return receipt requested. The thought of Rebecca opening that envelope, seeing her theft laid out in legal language, gave me a grim satisfaction. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. Friday afternoon, Rebecca showed up at my house. I saw her car pull into my driveway through the living room window, her sleek white SUV that had always seemed too expensive for someone perpetually short on rent. She didn't knock. She used the key I'd given her years ago, the one for emergencies. Mom, we need to talk. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, Derek trailing behind her. Their faces were hard, nothing like the loving daughter and son-in-law I thought I knew. You had no right to involve a lawyer, Rebecca started, her voice shaking with anger, not remorse. No right to humiliate us like this. I stood my ground, phone in my pocket, already recording. I had every right. You stole from me, Rebecca. For 8 years, you lied to my face and stole my money. Stole? Derek laughed sharply. Jesus, Dorothy, you gave us that money freely. We never held a gun to your head. You told me you needed it for rent. You said you'd be evicted. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Practiced. Perfect tears. Mom, we did need it. Just not for rent. We had other expenses, and we knew if we told you the truth, you'd judge us. So yes, we simplified the situation, but we were going to pay you back. 8 years, Rebecca. $55,000. We've been struggling. Derek's commissions haven't been what they used to be, and the kids' private school, and you paid off your house 7 years ago. Gerald Hutchinson told me everything. Rebecca's fake tears evaporated instantly. That old bastard. He's been harassing us for years, sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. You're going to believe some stranger over your own daughter? He has documentation, property records, photographs. Derek stepped closer, invading my space. You know what's going to happen if you pursue this? We'll cut you off. Completely. You'll never see your grandchildren again. Emma and Jacob will grow up not knowing their grandmother because you chose money over family. The threat landed like a physical blow. Emma was 9, Jacob 7. They were innocent in all this, but using them as weapons? Get out of my house. Mom, please. Rebecca reached for my hand, but I jerked away. You don't get to mom me anymore. You lost that right when you decided to steal from me. You have 10 days to return my money, or I'm filing criminal charges. Now, leave. You're going to regret this, Derek hissed. We have lawyers, too. We'll prove you gave us that money as gifts. We'll tell everyone you're senile, that you're making false accusations because you're lonely and bitter. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word you say. Rebecca pulled out her phone. I'm calling Adult Protective Services right now. You're clearly not capable of managing your own finances. We'll get guardianship, and then you'll have access to whatever I have left? No. I pulled out my own phone, showing the recording app actively running. I've documented this entire conversation, the threats, the manipulation, the admission that you lied about needing rent money. My attorney has copies of everything. You want to fight? Let's fight. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across Rebecca's face. They left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Through the curtains, I watched them argue in the driveway, Derek gesturing wildly, Rebecca crying real tears now. The moment their car pulled away, my knees buckled. I sank onto the couch, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. What had just happened? Had I really threatened my own daughter with criminal charges? Had she really threatened to take away my grandchildren? I called Marcus. They came here. They threatened me. I recorded everything. Send me the recording now. Dorothy, this just became a lot more serious. Using your grandchildren as leverage, threatening to declare you incompetent. These are intimidation tactics. We need to move fast. But I couldn't move fast. Not yet. For the next 3 days, I barely left my bed. The confrontation had drained something essential from me. I'd stood up to them, yes, but at what cost? My daughter hated me. My grandchildren would grow up thinking I was the villain. Was the money really worth losing my family? On the 4th day, Rebecca sent a text. Mom, can we please talk? Just the 2 of us? I miss you. The kids miss you. This has gotten so out of hand. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me, the mother part, the part that remembered rocking her to sleep as a baby, teaching her to ride a bike, holding her hand through her father's funeral, wanted to believe this was genuine, that she'd realized her mistake, that my daughter was still in there somewhere. But I'd learned something in the past 2 weeks. Trust, once shattered, doesn't reassemble easily. I called Marcus first. She wants to talk, just the 2 of us. Don't. It's a trap. She'll either try to manipulate you into dropping the demand, or she'll record you saying something she can use against you. If you want to communicate, do it through me. What if she's genuinely sorry? Dorothy, people who are genuinely sorry don't threaten to take away your grandchildren. They apologize and make restitution. Has she offered to return even $1? He was right. I texted back. All communication goes through my attorney. Rebecca's response came within seconds. You're choosing a stranger over your own daughter. Fine. Don't come crying to me when you die alone. I blocked her number, but the attacks didn't stop. Over the next week, Rebecca launched a campaign on social media. She posted about toxic parents who abandon their children over money and elderly family members who make false accusations due to declining mental health. She never named me directly, but mutual friends knew exactly who she meant. My inbox filled with messages from relatives and acquaintances. Dorothy, what's going on? Rebecca says you're accusing her of theft? Are you okay? Do you need help? The isolation was suffocating. I'd always been private, never one for extensive social circles, and Tom's death had narrowed my world even more. Rebecca had been my primary connection to family, to purpose. Now I had nothing. I stopped answering the phone, stopped checking email, spent days in my bathrobe, eating canned soup and wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, my doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer, but something made me peek through the window. It was Clara Hutchinson, Gerald's wife, a woman I'd never met. I opened the door cautiously. Mrs. Hutchinson? She was small and elegant, maybe 70, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Patterson, I hope I'm not intruding. Gerald told me everything, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. May I come in? We sat in my living room over tea, and Clara did something no one else had done. She listened, really listened. I told her everything. The 8 years of payments, the confrontation, Rebecca's threats, the social media attacks. You did the right thing, Clara said firmly. What she did was cruel, calculated theft. The fact that she's your daughter doesn't excuse it. It makes it worse. But I've lost my grandchildren. Have you? Or has Rebecca just told you that? Mrs. Patterson, Dorothy, may I be frank? I nodded. You're being abused. Financial abuse, emotional abuse. Rebecca is using every manipulation tactic in the book. Threats, guilt, social isolation, gaslighting. I've seen it before. My sister went through something similar with her son. The only way it stopped was when she stood her ground completely. What happened? He came crawling back when he realized she was serious. Some people only respect strength. Your daughter needs to learn that actions have consequences, even when you're dealing with family. Especially when you're dealing with family. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This is my therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen. She specializes in family trauma. You need support, Dorothy, professional support, and you need friends. She smiled gently. Gerald and I would like to be your friends, if you'll have us. I started crying then. Deep, wrenching sobs I'd been holding back for weeks. Clara held my hand and didn't say anything, just let me purge the grief and anger and confusion. When I finally calmed down, she said, "You're stronger than you think. You stood up to them. Now you just have to stay standing." That afternoon, I called Dr. Chen and made an appointment. I also called my old friend Martha, someone I'd lost touch with after Tom died. "Martha, I need help. Can we meet for coffee?" "Of course, when? Tomorrow?" "I'll be there." Slowly, painfully, I started building a support system beyond my daughter. I joined a senior center book club, started attending church again, reconnected with old colleagues from my banking days. And through it all, Rebecca stayed silent. No more texts, no more social media posts. According to Gerald, who kept an eye on things next door, she and Derek seemed to be watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. The 10-day deadline from Marcus's letter passed. They sent nothing. It was time for the next step. They came on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after the deadline expired. I saw them through my window, Rebecca, Derek, and the children. Emma and Jacob held handmade cards, their small faces uncertain. I'd been expecting this. Dr. Chen had warned me. When legal pressure increases, abusers often try the family card one last time. They'll use whatever emotional leverage they have. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "Grandma!" Emma rushed forward, hugging my waist. "We made you cards. Mommy said you were sick and that's why you haven't visited." My heart cracked. Jacob hung back, shy as always, but clutching a crayon drawing of what looked like our family. "Hello, sweethearts," I managed, stroking Emma's hair. "I missed you so much." Rebecca's eyes were red-rimmed, her face gaunt. "Mom, please, can we come in? Just for a few minutes? The kids have been asking about you constantly." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. We sat in the living room, Emma and Jacob showing me their cards and chattering about school while Rebecca and Derek watched with calculated expressions. After a few minutes, Rebecca said brightly, "Kids, why don't you go play in Grandma's backyard? Remember the swing set?" The children ran off and the temperature in the room immediately dropped. "Dorothy, we need to end this," Derek started. "It's gone too far. You've made your point." "My point?" Rebecca leaned forward, wringing her hands. "Mom, I know I should have been more honest about our finances. I know I should have told you we owned the house. But we were embarrassed. We didn't want you to think we were failures. So you lied and stole instead?" "We didn't steal." Derek's voice rose before he controlled it. "You gave us that money willingly. Legally, they were gifts. No court would see it otherwise." I'd discussed this with Marcus. He'd confirmed that proving fraud was difficult, but not impossible, especially with the documented pattern of deception, the specific requests for rent, and the threats they'd made. "Then you have nothing to worry about," I said calmly. Rebecca's mask slipped slightly. "Mom, if you pursue this, it will destroy us. Derek could lose his job. They'll fire him if he's involved in a fraud investigation. We could lose the house. The kids could end up in foster care. Is that what you want? To destroy your own grandchildren's lives over money? You destroyed your own lives when you decided to con me for 8 years." "Con you?" Rebecca stood abruptly. "Jesus Christ, Mom! You're acting like we held you hostage. You offered to help. You wanted to feel needed and important, and we let you. We did you a favor." There it was, the real Rebecca, the one beneath the tears and manipulation. "Get out." "No." Derek stood too, blocking my path to the door. "Not until you agree to drop this. We'll make payments, okay? $500 a month until it's paid back. But you're not filing criminal charges, and you're not suing us. We have those kids out there to think about. You should have thought about them before you decided to steal from their grandmother." Rebecca's voice turned venomous. "You know what? You're a bitter, lonely old woman who never got over Dad dying. You're so desperate for attention that you've invented this whole fantasy where we're the villains. But everyone knows the truth. Everyone knows you're losing it. I have recordings of you admitting you lied about needing rent money. Recordings you made illegally, without our consent. That's a crime, Dorothy. We could have you arrested." I smiled then, a cold, hard smile I didn't recognize as my own. California is a 2-party consent state for confidential communications. But our conversation wasn't confidential. You were in my home, threatening me. The recording is perfectly legal. Marcus has already confirmed it with the district attorney. The color drained from Derek's face. "You're bluffing," Rebecca whispered. "Try me." Through the window, I could see Emma and Jacob playing on the old swing set Tom had built. innocent, unburdened, unaware that their parents were criminals. Last chance, Mom. Rebecca's voice shook. Drop this, or you'll never see those kids again. We'll move. We'll change our names. We'll make sure you die alone without ever knowing your grandchildren. Then I guess I'll die alone. For a moment, I thought Derek might physically attack me. His hands clenched into fists, his face purple with rage. But Rebecca grabbed his arm. Let's go. She's made her choice. They collected the children, ignoring their protests. As Emma was dragged out, she looked back at me with confused, tearful eyes. Grandma? Did we do something wrong? No, sweetheart, you're perfect. I love you so much. The door slammed. I stood in my silent house, shaking. Not from fear, from fury. They'd used those innocent children as weapons, as shields, as emotional blackmail. What kind of parents did that? I called Marcus. File everything. Criminal complaint, civil suit, all of it. I want them prosecuted. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the wooden benches. I sat behind Marcus at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded calmly in my lap, while my heart hammered against my ribs. This was the preliminary hearing for the civil suit. The criminal investigation was ongoing, but Marcus had advised we move forward with recovering the money first. Let them see we're serious, he'd said. Sometimes that's enough to trigger a settlement. Rebecca and Derek sat across the aisle with their attorney, a slick-looking man named Howard Brennan, who'd apparently come cheap despite his expensive suit. Neither of them looked at me. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Walton, reviewed the case file with an expression that revealed nothing. Mrs. Patterson, your claim is that the defendants obtained $55,000 from you through fraudulent misrepresentation. Is that correct? Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor. Over an 8-year period, the defendants repeatedly solicited funds from Mrs. Patterson by claiming they needed assistance with rent payments. However, property records show they purchased the residence in question 15 years ago and paid off the mortgage 7 years ago, 1 year before the first solicitation occurred. Judge Walton turned to Brennan. Mr. Brennan, your response? Brennan stood smoothly. Your Honor, this is a family dispute being mischaracterized as fraud. Mrs. Patterson willingly gave money to her daughter and son-in-law. There were no contracts, no loan agreements, no formal obligations. These were gifts, pure and simple. That Mrs. Patterson now regrets her generosity doesn't constitute fraud. Gifts? Marcus pulled out a folder thick with documentation. Your Honor, we have text messages, voicemails, and emails spanning 8 years in which the defendants specifically requested money for rent or to avoid eviction. In one text message from January 2019, Ms. Rebecca Patterson wrote, Mom, please. The landlord is threatening to evict us if we don't pay by Friday. Can you send $1,200? That's not a gift request. That's a fraudulent solicitation. Brennan barely flinched. My clients may have simplified their financial situation to avoid burdening Mrs. Patterson with details, but simplified? Marcus's voice cut like a blade. They claimed repeatedly to be renting a property they owned. That's not simplification. That's deception. And the pattern is clear and consistent. Every request came with fabricated urgency about rent, eviction, or landlord demands. Judge Walton raised a hand. Mr. Brennan, do your clients dispute that they owned the property during the period in question? Brennan hesitated. No, Your Honor, but... And do they dispute that they solicited funds by representing those funds were needed for rent payment? Another hesitation. Derek whispered urgently to Brennan, but the attorney shook his head minutely. Your Honor, my clients maintain they had legitimate financial needs and... That's not what I asked. Judge Walton's voice was ice. Did they or did they not request money specifically for rent on a property they owned? Rebecca stood suddenly, tears streaming. Your Honor, please. She's my mother. I made mistakes, yes, but I never meant to hurt her. We were desperate. We had medical bills, the kids' school. Sit down, Miss Patterson. Judge Walton's tone brooked no argument. Rebecca collapsed back into her chair. The judge looked at me directly for the first time. Mrs. Patterson, you're 72 years old. This money represented a significant portion of your retirement savings. Is that correct? I stood, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. Yes, Your Honor. My late husband and I spent 40 years saving that money. When my daughter told me she needed help, I gave it without hesitation because she's my child. I trusted her. She exploited that trust systematically and deliberately. Not once or twice, but for 8 years. That's not a family dispute. That's theft. Judge Walton made notes on her pad, then looked at Brennan. Does your client wish to settle this matter? Brennan and Derek had a whispered conference. Finally, Brennan stood. Your Honor, we'd need time to consider. You've had 3 weeks since the demand letter. I'm ordering a settlement conference for next week. In the meantime, I'm granting a preliminary injunction preventing the defendants from disposing of assets. If they attempt to sell their home, transfer property, or hide funds, they'll be in contempt. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. As people stood and gathered their things, Rebecca finally looked at me. Her face was a mask of hatred and humiliation. I hope you're happy, she hissed as she passed. You've destroyed your own family. I met her eyes without flinching. No, Rebecca, you did that all by yourself. In the hallway, Marcus gripped my shoulder. That went better than expected. Walton sees through their lies. We're going to win this. For the first time in months, I believed him. The settlement conference happened 5 days later in a drab conference room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Rebecca and Derek sat across from me, their lawyer looking significantly less confident than he had in court. Judge Walton had made her position clear through her law clerk. Settle or face a trial where all evidence, including the recordings of Derek's threats, would become public record. Marcus laid out our terms. Full restitution of $55,340, written admission of fraudulent conduct, permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with Mrs. Patterson except through legal counsel, and a public statement correcting the false claims made on social media. Brennan laughed weakly. You can't be serious. My clients don't have $55,000 lying around. Then they can sell their house, Marcus said coldly. The house they claimed they couldn't afford to rent, but actually owned free and clear. Or they can set up a payment plan with severe penalties for default. Those are the options. Derek exploded. This is extortion. We're not admitting to anything, and we're sure as hell not selling our house. Then we go to trial, I said quietly. And I'll testify about every lie, every manipulation, every threat. The jury will hear you threatening to take away my grandchildren. They'll hear Rebecca's social media attacks. They'll see 8 years of documented fraud. And when we win, and we will win, you'll owe not just the money, but damages and legal fees. We're talking over $100,000. Rebecca's face crumpled. Mom, please, don't. I held up a hand. You don't get to mom me anymore. You made your choices. Now live with them. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I watched Derek's jaw clench and unclench, watched Rebecca dab at her eyes with a tissue that was already shredded. Brennan whispered urgently with his clients, their heads bent together like conspirators whose conspiracy had finally collapsed. I felt strangely calm. For months, I'd been the one scrambling, the one off balance, the one wondering if I was doing the right thing. Now, watching them squirm, watching them face the consequences of their own actions, this was clarity. This was justice, Finally, Derek slammed his hand on the table. Fine, we'll pay. But we're not admitting fraud. Then there's no deal, Marcus said. Mrs. Patterson wants the truth on record. Either you admit what you did, or we let a judge and jury decide. More whispered conferences. Rebecca was crying again, but these tears seemed real. Tears of defeat, of consequence finally arriving after 8 years of unchecked deception. She kept looking at me like she expected me to break, to soften, to revert to being the pushover mother she'd known her entire life. I didn't break. How much time do we have to pay? Brennan finally asked, defeat evident in his voice. Immediate payment of $25,000. The remaining $30,340 in monthly installments of $2,500 for 1 year, secured by a lien on their property. Miss one payment, and the full amount becomes due immediately, plus the admission, the restraining order, and the public statement. We don't have $25,000 in cash. You have a house worth approximately $400,000. Get a home equity loan. Figure it out. You had no problem spending my client's retirement money. Find a way to return it. Derek's face turned purple. You're destroying us. We have kids to feed, a mortgage. You paid off your mortgage 7 years ago, Marcus interrupted. Stop lying. You've lied enough. The negotiation dragged on for 3 hours. They tried to reduce the immediate payment to $10,000. They tried to eliminate the public statement, arguing it would humiliate their children. They tried to extend the payment timeline to 3 years, to 5 years. Marcus and I didn't budge on a single point. At one point, Rebecca tried a different approach. Mom, think about Emma and Jacob. They'll read that statement someday. They'll know what we did. Is that what you want? For your grandchildren to think their parents are criminals? I looked at her steadily. What I want is for your children to learn that actions have consequences, that you can't lie and steal and manipulate your way through life. Better they learn it now from you than later from someone less forgiving. Less forgiving? Derek's voice dripped with venom. You're 72 years old and you're tearing apart your own family over money. I'm 72 years old and I'm teaching my daughter that even mothers have limits. Even love has boundaries. You crossed both. Finally, as afternoon shadows stretched across the conference table, Brennan nodded grimly. We'll accept the terms. But we need 2 weeks to secure the initial payment. 1 week, Marcus countered, and the admission and public statement happen immediately. Brennan consulted with his clients one final time. Rebecca was openly sobbing now. Derek stared at the table, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Agreed, Brennan said quietly. That evening, Rebecca posted on Facebook, I need to address something publicly. Over the past 8 years, I asked my mother for money for rent when in fact I owned my home. This was wrong and deceptive. I have hurt someone who loved and trusted me. I am working to make full restitution and can only hope that someday she can forgive me, though I don't deserve it. I'm sorry, Mom. The comments section filled immediately, some supportive, many shocked, a few applauding my courage. Several people I didn't even know wrote lengthy comments about their own experiences with family financial abuse. One woman wrote, "Your mother is braver than you deserved." I read it once and then closed the browser. Her words didn't matter anymore. The money mattered. The accountability mattered. The public record mattered. The cashier's check for $25,000 arrived 6 days later via courier, delivered to Marcus's office. He called me immediately. Dorothy, it's here. They actually came through. I felt something release in my chest. Tension I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Marcus deposited it into an escrow account pending the finalization of the settlement agreement. The formal documents were signed on a cold November morning in a different conference room. Rebecca's hand shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Derek wouldn't look at anyone, not at me, not at Marcus, not even at his own lawyer. Their admission of fraudulent conduct became part of the permanent legal record filed with the county clerk's office. Anyone searching their names would find it. As we left the attorney's office, Marcus turned to me with a rare smile. "You did it, Dorothy. You actually did it. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen someone stand this firm against their own child." "We did it," I corrected. "So what now?" I thought about that. The money was being returned. Justice had been served. But Rebecca was still my daughter, Derek still my son-in-law, Emma and Jacob still my grandchildren. Children I might never see again except in photographs or chance encounters. "Now," I said slowly, "now I figure out how to live with this." Because winning, I was learning, doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like survival. But survival, I was discovering, was its own kind of triumph. 6 months after the settlement, my life had transformed in ways I never anticipated. The monthly payments arrived like clockwork. $2,500 on the first of every month. Electronic transfers that appeared in my account without fanfare or communication. Marcus had set up the system to be completely automated. I didn't have to see Rebecca or Derek, didn't have to speak to them. The money simply came, as it should have all along. I used some of it to finally take that trip to Italy I'd been planning with Tom before he got sick. Walking through the streets of Rome, standing in the Sistine Chapel, eating fresh pasta in a tiny Tuscan village, I felt my husband's presence in a way I hadn't in years. He would have been proud of me, I thought, proud that I'd stood my ground. I also invested in myself, joined a watercolor painting class at the senior center, and discovered a talent I'd never known existed. My small paintings of landscapes and flowers started selling at local craft fairs. Nothing substantial, $20 here, $50 there. But the validation warmed something inside me that had gone cold during Rebecca's betrayal. Clara and Gerald Hutchinson became unexpected pillars in my life. We had dinner together twice a month, attended the same church, took walks in the park on Sunday mornings. Clara introduced me to her book club, where I found a community of smart, funny women who asked nothing from me except my thoughts on the latest mystery novel. Dr. Chen helped me process the grief, not just for the daughter I'd lost, but for the daughter I'd thought I had. "You're mourning an illusion," she explained during one session. "The Rebecca you loved was partly real and partly a construction. Coming to terms with both parts is the work." It was hard work. Some days I still reached for my phone to call her, to share some small piece of news. Then I'd remember, and the ache would return, fresh as ever. But I wasn't lonely anymore. That was the surprise. I'd feared that cutting Rebecca out would leave me isolated, but instead, I'd found space for real relationships, people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. Meanwhile, according to Gerald's occasional updates, Rebecca and Derek's life was unraveling. Derek lost his sales job 3 months after the settlement. Something about ethical violations. Apparently, his company had gotten wind of the fraud case and decided he was a liability. He'd found new work, but it paid significantly less. The strain showed on the house. The lawn grew shaggy. Paint peeled on the shutters. The expensive SUV disappeared, replaced by an older sedan. Gerald mentioned seeing them arguing on the driveway late at night, their voices carrying across the yards. "Rebecca looks 10 years older," Clara told me one afternoon over tea. "I saw her at the grocery store last week. She didn't recognize me, thank God, but Dorothy, the woman, looked haunted." I tried to feel sympathy. Failed. Maybe that made me a terrible person, but I'd earned my lack of sympathy through 8 years of lies and $55,000 in theft. The monthly payments continued, but Marcus warned me they were struggling. "They're cutting it close each month. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to renegotiate or claim financial hardship. If they miss a payment, enforce the full amount immediately, I said. No exceptions. You've gotten harder, Marcus observed, not unkindly. I've gotten stronger. There was a difference. The biggest surprise came 8 months after the settlement. A letter arrived, addressed in a child's careful handwriting. To Grandma Dorothy, Emma. She'd found my address somehow and written me a letter full of innocuous news about school and friends, ending with, I miss you. Love, Emma. P.S. Jacob misses you too, but he's too shy to write. I cried reading it, then called Marcus. Can they use this against me? Claim I'm violating the restraining order? You didn't initiate contact, you're fine, but be careful how you respond. I wrote back, a short, loving note that avoided any mention of her parents or our situation. Just grandmother things. I was proud of her grades. I hoped her soccer team was doing well. I loved her and Jacob very much. The letters became regular. Once a month, sometimes twice. Through Emma's words, I got glimpses of my grandchildren's lives. It wasn't the same as seeing them, holding them, being part of their daily routine. But it was something. And something, I'd learned, was sometimes enough. I was rebuilding my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. I had my art, my friends, my dignity, and slowly, payment by payment, my money back. Rebecca had taken so much, but she hadn't taken everything, and what remained was enough to build something new, something real, something mine. Looking back now, I understand the lessons this nightmare taught me. Trust isn't the same as blind faith. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. And family, real family, is built on respect, not blood alone. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, that sometimes the hardest battles are worth fighting, that you can survive losing someone you love when you realize you're losing something false. If your own family is taking advantage of you, don't ignore the warning signs like I did. Document everything. Seek help. Remember, you deserve dignity, even from those who share your DNA. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have forgiven Rebecca or fought like I did? I hope you never have to find out. But if you do, I hope you choose yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. Some endings aren't happy. They're just honest. And sometimes that's enough.